Chapter 8. The Sea Voyage. The ferry groaned as it cut through the waves, wood and rope creaking in the wind. The sky was a brilliant blue. The sun warm on Tidus's skin as he leaned against the railing, staring out at the endless horizon. It should have been relaxing, but his stomach kept twisting with a strange unease. Behind him, he heard Wacker's familiar laugh and turned to see him juggling his blitzball one-handed, chatting with a pair of sailors. "You never stop with that thing, do you?" Tidus called. Wacker grinned and tossed the ball his way. Tidus caught it effortlessly, muscle memory kicking in, and for a moment the world felt normal again. "Can't stop," Wacker said. "Blitzball keeps me sharp. You too, yeah?" "Yeah," Tidus said with a small smile. "Back home, I used to train like crazy. Hours every day. Back home," Wacker repeated softly, his grin fading just a little. "Must have been something." Tidus looked down at the ball in his hands, the memory of the Zanakan Stadium flashing through his mind, the cheers, the lights, the life he'd lost. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It was." Wacker clapped him on the shoulder, not unkindly. "You'll see," he said. "We'll make a team out of you yet. Luca's gonna love you." Later, Tidus found Lulu standing alone near the prow, her arms folded, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Not much for small talk, are you?" Tidus asked, trying a grin. Lulu didn't even look at him. "There's nothing small about what we're doing," she said. "A summoner's pilgrimage isn't a game." Tidus bristled. "I didn't say it was." She turned to him then, her gaze sharp, appraising. "You treat everything like a game," Lulu said. "Even danger, even death. You laugh to hide the fear. I've seen it before." The words hit harder than Tidus expected. "So what if I do?" he shot back. "What's wrong with laughing, huh? What's wrong with trying to stay positive?" Lulu's expression softened just a fraction, almost imperceptibly. "Nothing," she said finally. "Just remember that Yuna's life is on the line. Every choice you make out here matters." Tidus swallowed hard, her words settling in his chest like a stone. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I get it." Kimari was the next one he tried to talk to. The Ronso stood near the mast, arms crossed, as still as a carved statue. "Hey," Tidus said, walking up beside him. "Kimari, right?" Kimari glanced at him, but said nothing. "So, do you ever talk?" Tidus asked. Silence. "Okay, cool, you're the strong silent type," Tidus said, throwing up his hands. "That's fine, I can carry the conversation. What do you do for fun? Do you have hobbies? Do Ronsos even—" Kimari growled softly, a sound that was more warning than answer. Tidus backed up with a sheepish grin. "Right, no questions, got it." But when he turned to leave, Kimari spoke. Just one word. "Protect." Tidus paused, glancing back. "You mean Yuna?" Kimari nodded once. "Always." There was nothing else to say after that. The late afternoon sun painted the sea gold, the horizon stretching forever in every direction. The wind carried the tang of salt and the creak of wood, a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat. Tidus sat beside Yuna on the deck, watching the light dance on the water. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Tidus broke the silence. "Back there, you said you're doing this for everyone in Spira," he said. "But what about you? What do you want?" Yuna smiled softly, her gaze still on the horizon. "I want to make people happy," she said, "to give them a chance to smile again, even if it's only for a little while." Tidus frowned, frustrated. "That's what you want? For everyone else? I mean, don't you ever want something just for you? She tilted her head, thoughtful. Sometimes, she admitted. When I was little, I dreamed of seeing all of Spira, of meeting new people, learning their stories. Her eyes grew distant, as if remembering something bittersweet. And now I will. Just not the way I imagined. Tidus lay back against the deck, staring up at the sky. Where I'm from, we had everything, he said quietly. Lights everywhere. Music. Crowds. You could go out any night and find people celebrating something, anything. Blitzball was huge. The stadium was always full. It was alive. Una turned to look at him, curiosity lighting her eyes. Where are you from? Tidus hesitated a moment, then smiled. Zanarkand, he said. Una blinked, startled. Zanarkand, she repeated, as though testing the word. Yeah, Tidus said, propping himself up on his elbows. Big city, right in the middle of the ocean. Brightest place in the world. But Una's expression had grown solemn. You can't be from Zanarkand, she said gently. Zanarkand was destroyed 1,000 years ago. Tidus felt a chill run through him. What? It was the last city to fall in the war with Bavel, Una said softly. Now it's a holy place. The ruins are sacred, where summoners go to obtain the final aeon. Tidus stared at her, the words spinning in his head. 1,000 years. His city, his home, his whole life. Gone, not just across the sea, but across time. I'm not lying, he said, his voice tight. I was just there. Last night I was playing blitzball in the stadium, and then Sin came. Una was quiet for a moment, then placed her hand gently over his. I believe you, she said softly. Tidus looked at her, startled. You do? She smiled, warm and a little sad. Spira is full of mysteries, she said. Maybe you were brought here for a reason. Maybe you're meant to be part of this journey. Tidus swallowed hard, her words settling somewhere deep inside him. Yeah, he said quietly. Maybe I am. They sat in silence for a while, the ferry gently rocking beneath them, until Tidus suddenly sat up, shaking off the heavy mood. You know, he said, forcing a grin, I think you'd like Zanarkand. At least, the Zanarkand I knew. Una tilted her head. What's it like? Tidus's grin widened. Huge stadium right in the middle of the city. Biggest blitzball sphere you've ever seen. The crowd goes wild. Thousands of people cheering so loud you can feel it in your chest. Lights everywhere, music blasting, food stands on every corner. He spread his arms wide, eyes shining. At night, the city glows like a dream. You'd never want to sleep. Una giggled softly, her eyes bright with wonder. It sounds amazing, she said. I'd love to see it. Yeah? Tidus said, grinning. Tell you what, when we're done with this whole pilgrimage thing, I'll take you there. VIP seats. You'll watch the Abes crush the goers. Una blinked. The goers? Worst team in the league, Tidus said. You'd hate them. Una giggled again, covering her mouth with her hand, but she was smiling so wide now that Tidus couldn't help but laugh too. And you'd be on the field? She asked. Of course, Tidus said, puffing his chest out. Star player, number 1, the crowd chanting my name. He jumped to his feet, miming a dramatic victory pose. Tidus, 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 he shouted, hands cupped to his mouth. Una was laughing openly now, her shoulders shaking. "You're ridiculous," she said, still smiling. Tidus dropped back down beside her, grinning. "Yeah, but I made you laugh, didn't I?" Yuna's smile softened. "Yes," she said quietly. "Thank you for that." For a moment, they just looked at each other, the playful energy giving way to something quieter, warmer. Then the ship rocked slightly, a shudder that made them both glance toward the horizon. The sun was dipping lower now, and the wind had picked up, the waves growing rougher.
Somewhere above, a lookout shouted, "Something's out there!" The mood shattered. The deck erupted into motion, sailors running, shouting orders. Tidus and Yuna stood, their laughter gone as a distant roar echoed over the waves. Tidus's heart lurched. He knew that sound. Scene. Chapter 9. Sin's Attack. The lookout's cry still echoed when the sea exploded. A massive column of water surged skyward, the spray drenching the deck as the ship pitched violently. Sailors grabbed hold of ropes, shouting as the waves crashed around them. Then it appeared. Sin's monstrous form broke the surface. A mountain of darkness and scale, its glowing lines pulsing like veins of molten light. Its presence swallowed the horizon, the air thick with a sound that wasn't quite a roar, wasn't quite a scream, but something deeper, something that rattled the bones. Tidus's breath caught. Not again. Waka shoved a weapon into his hands. A spare sword, chipped and worn, but solid. "Fiends!" Waka shouted over the roar. "Sin spawn, coming aboard!" They hit the deck in a shower of water and chitin, twisted, nightmarish creatures that skittered across the wood, jaws snapping. Lulu was already casting, black flames erupting from her doll and engulfing the nearest fiend. Kimahri leapt into the fray, spear flashing. "Stay close to Yuna!" Lulu barked. Tidus snapped out of his daze and spun toward Yuna. She was standing near the mast, staff clutched tightly, her face pale but calm. "Stay behind me!" Tidus shouted, stepping in front of her as a sin spawn lunged. His sword met it mid-leap, the impact jarring his arms. The creature screeched as he kicked it back, heart hammering. Another fiend scrambled over the railing, its claws raking at the deck. Tidus ducked, slashing upwards, splitting the thing in two. "Not bad," Waka shouted, slamming his blitzball into another. "Yeah, well, I've had practice," Tidus yelled back. The ship lurched violently, sending several sailors sprawling. Tidus grabbed the mast to keep his footing and looked up. Sin was closer now, its vast, whale-like form gliding just beneath the surface. Every time it breached, the air filled with that low, soul-rattling hum. "We can't fight that!" Tidus shouted. "We don't fight Sin," Lulu snapped. "We survive." Another wave of sin spawn hit the deck, larger this time. Tidus found himself fighting side by side with Kimahri, the Ronso's spear thrusting with brutal precision. A sin spawn nearly broke through to Yuna, but Tidus intercepted it, slamming his sword through its chest. "You okay?" he asked, glancing back at her. Yuna nodded, her expression calm but her knuckles white around her staff. "I'm fine," she said. Then the ship groaned, a long, terrible sound as Sin passed directly beneath it. The world tilted, the deck split with a crack, timbers snapping as the ship heaved sideways. Tidus grabbed Yuna, pulling her against him as water crashed over them. "Hold on!" he shouted. But the wave was too strong. The deck vanished from beneath his feet, and for an instant there was only sky and sea and the deafening roar of Sin. Then everything was water. Cold, crushing, endless. Tidus fought his way to the surface, coughing, eyes stinging with salt. The ship was breaking apart, debris scattered across the waves. Sin loomed in the distance, already moving away, leaving nothing but ruin in its wake. "Yuna!" Tidus shouted, spinning in the water. He caught sight of her clinging to a piece of wreckage nearby, Waka pulling himself onto another. Kimahri swam powerfully through the waves, heading toward Yuna. Tidus kicked hard, forcing himself toward them. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him was Sin's massive glowing form fading into the horizon. Then there was nothing. Chapter 10. Kilika's Ashes. When Tidus woke, the world was quiet. He was lying on the splintered remains of a deck plank, the sea rocking him gently as though mocking the violence of what had just happened. His throat burned with salt water. Every muscle ached. But he was alive. He sat up, scanning the endless horizon until he spotted land, a jagged coastline not far away. The ferry had been heading for Kilika. He prayed this was it. The current carried him toward the shore where strong hands hauled him out of the water. "Got another one!" a voice shouted. Tidus coughed, spitting seawater, and looked up to see Waka kneeling beside him, dripping wet but smiling with relief. "You're alive, yeah?" Waka said. "Barely," Tidus groaned, pushing himself upright. "What about Yuna? Lulu? Kimahri?" "Safe," Waka said, nodding toward the beach. Yuna was there, her clothes soaked but intact, Lulu standing beside her, wringing seawater from her hair, Kimahri looming like a drenched statue. Tidus felt something loosen in his chest. They were alive, but as he looked past them toward the village that sprawled along the shore, his relief turned to ice. Kilika had been torn apart. Where there had once been houses and docks, there were now shattered timbers and smoking ruins. Fires still burned where boats had been dashed against the rocks. The air smelled of salt, smoke, and death. Survivors staggered among the wreckage, dazed and hollow-eyed. Yuna's gaze swept over the devastation, her face calm but her hands clenched tightly around her staff. "We should help," she said softly. And so they did. Tidus found himself hauling debris, searching for survivors, pulling injured villagers from the wreckage. He saw Lulu kneeling over a wounded man, casting healing magic with a grim expression. Waka moved with quiet efficiency, comforting crying children, guiding people to shelter. Kimahri worked silently, lifting heavy beams as though they weighed nothing. And Yuna? Yuna moved among the dead. She knelt beside each body, whispered a prayer, and touched her fingers to her forehead. Tidus watched her work in silence, not understanding at first, until he realized what she was doing. She was sending them. At sunset, the villagers gathered at the ruined dock. Una stood at the edge of the water, the sky burning red and gold behind her. The sea was still, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Then Una began to dance. Her movements were slow, deliberate, beautiful, a ritual both mournful and transcendent. Her staff traced arcs of light through the air as she stepped lightly across the dock, every gesture full of grace. The sea glowed faintly beneath her feet. Tidus felt the hairs on his arms rise. Around them, the fireflies, tiny glowing motes of light, began to rise from the water, spiraling upward like fireflies into the darkening sky. The villagers watched in silence, tears on their faces. And for the first time, Tidus understood the weight that Una carried. This wasn't just a journey to fight some monster. She carried the grief of a world on her shoulders. When the last firefly faded into the night, Una lowered her staff and stood still for a long moment before turning back to them. Her expression was calm, but Tidus could see the exhaustion in her eyes. No one spoke, there was nothing to say. That night, they camped among the ruins. Tidus lay awake, staring at the stars, the sound of the waves in his ears. He thought of Zanarkand, of the cheers of the crowd, the roar of the stadium, and then of Kilika's silence. This is real, he thought. This is what sin does. This is what we're up against. And for the first time, Tidus felt something he hadn't since he'd arrived in Spira. Anger. Not just fear, not just confusion, but a white-hot fury. Sin had taken his home, and now it had taken Kilika. He clenched his fists. He couldn't just drift along anymore. He had to see this through. Chapter 11. Fires in the Dark. The campfire crackled softly, the only warm light in a world that felt hollow. The ruins of Kilika lay behind them, dark silhouettes against the sea, and the sound of waves was broken now and then by distant voices of grieving villagers. No one spoke for a long time. Tidus sat cross-legged near the flames, staring into them, letting the heat wash over his face. His body ached from hauling wreckage all day, but his mind was too full to rest. Waka sat opposite him, poking the fire with a stick. His usual easy smile was gone, his expression somber. "You know," Waka said finally, his voice low. "I grew up on Besed, thinking sin was just something you lived with, like the weather. It comes, it goes, you pray, you wait. But seeing this," he shook his head, "feels different, yeah?" Lulu, sitting a little apart from the fire, arms folded, spoke without looking at them. "It's always different when you're the one burying the dead," she said quietly. There was a heavy silence. Kimari sat like a statue, his yellow eyes reflecting the firelight. He hadn't said a word since they landed. Una was seated close to Tidus, her knees drawn up, her staff laid across her lap. She hadn't spoken much either, but now she did. "When I was little," she said softly, "I used to dream about being a summoner. I thought it would be noble, glorious, like the stories." She stared into the fire, her face calm but her voice fragile. "But no one ever tells you about this part. The people you can't save. The faces you'll remember for the rest of your life." Tidus glanced at her, the firelight flickering in her eyes. "You saved them," he said quietly. "You gave them peace." She shook her head slowly. "It's not enough." The words hit Tidus like a weight. He wanted to say something, anything, but for once he had no clever remark, no easy smile to offer. Instead, he just reached out and gently touched her hand. She didn't pull away. "We'll stop sin," he said at last. His voice was quiet, but there was a hard edge to it now, a conviction that hadn't been there before. "Whatever it takes." Waka looked up at him, then nodded. "Damn right." Even Lulu glanced at Tidus, her expression softening just slightly. "Big words," she said. "I hope you're ready to prove them." Tidus met her gaze. "I am." The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks into the night sky. For a while, they all just sat together, letting the silence settle again. And though the air was heavy with grief, Tidus felt something else too. Something he hadn't felt since Zanarkand. He felt like he belonged. Chapter 12. The Temple of Kilika. The morning air was cool when they set out. The village was still quiet, as though holding its breath after the night's tragedy. Survivors lined the path, bowing as Yuna passed, some with tears still streaming down their faces. Tidus walked behind her, sword at his side, feeling strangely out of place. They look at her like she's more than human. But maybe, after what he'd seen last night, she was. The path to Kilika Temple wound through a lush jungle. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, painting the forest floor in shifting patches of gold and green. Despite the beauty, there was no birdsong, only the sound of their footsteps and the distant rush of waterfalls. At last, they came to a clearing. The temple stood on a rise at the heart of the jungle, its spires gleaming like polished stone, its steps lined with prayer banners fluttering in the morning breeze. It was beautiful and heavy. Tidus felt it the moment he stepped onto the temple grounds. A stillness, a hush that settled over him like a physical weight. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of incense. The main chamber was vast, its floor inlaid with intricate patterns of stone, its walls adorned with statues of Yevon's teachings. Monks knelt in prayer as they entered. Yuna bowed deeply before the altar, her guardians following suit. Tidus hesitated, then awkwardly mimicked them, earning a small smile from Waka. "Nice try, yeah?" Waka whispered. Lulu gave him a sidelong glance. "He'll learn." Beyond the altar was a heavy door, the entrance to the cloister of trials. One of the priests stepped forward. "Summoner Yuna," he intoned. "Do you wish to pray in the chamber of the faith?" "Yes," Yuna said, her voice steady. The priest nodded. "Then you may enter." The guardians followed her into the cloister, a twisting, puzzle-like maze of glowing glyphs, ancient mechanisms, and stone corridors lit by soft blue light. Tidus watched in fascination as Lulu and Waka guided him through the temple's challenges, using glowing spheres of light and strange pedestals to unlock the way forward. "What is this place?" Tidus muttered. "The Cloister of Trials," Waka said. "Every summoner must pass through it to reach the faith." "It's a test of faith, yeah? And we're just allowed to tag along?" "Guardians," Lulu said simply. "It is our duty to protect Yuna, even here." At last, they reached the great door that led to the Chamber of the Faith. Only Yuna could enter. She turned to them, her expression calm but solemn. "I'll be back soon," she said. Kimahri bowed his head slightly. "We wait," he rumbled. The great door closed behind her with a resonant thud, leaving them in the silence of the antechamber. Minutes passed, then longer. Tidus fidgeted, pacing the floor. "How long does this usually take?" he asked. "As long as it takes," Lulu said, not opening her eyes from where she sat, meditating. "What if something happens in there?" Waka chuckled quietly. "Relax, yeah? This is Yuna we're talking about. She's fine." But Tidus couldn't relax. The stillness pressed down on him, every passing second stretching like hours. Finally, the door opened, and Yuna stepped out, but she was not alone. Behind her floated a being of pure, luminous power, a great bird-like figure with wings of living flame, its very presence humming with energy. An Aeon, Yuna's Aeon. Tidus's breath caught in his throat. "It's beautiful." The Aeon hovered silently, radiant and terrible, before vanishing in a burst of light. Yuna looked exhausted but triumphant. "Its name is Valifor," she said softly. Tidus grinned, awestruck. "You just called that thing? Like Whenever you want? Una smiled faintly. Whenever Spira needs it. For a moment, no one spoke. The air felt charged like the moment after a storm. And for the first time since he'd arrived in this world, Tidus truly believed they might be able to beat sin. Chapter 13. A Moment in the Courtyard. Evening had fallen by the time they left the temple. The jungle was alive again with the sounds of night, insects chirping, leaves whispering in the breeze, but the temple grounds remained quiet, solemn. The others had gone ahead, giving Una time to rest before they departed Kilika in the morning. Tidus found her sitting alone in the courtyard, her staff laid across her lap, the moonlight catching on the silver bangles in her hair. For a moment he just stood there, watching her. She looked peaceful. Tired, yes, but also calm in a way that made the whole world seem still. Finally, he stepped forward. "Mind if I sit?" She looked up at him and smiled, small but genuine. "Please." He sat down beside her on the stone steps. The night air was cool, and the temple glowed softly behind them, its lights reflected in the courtyard pool. For a while, neither spoke. "So," Tidus said at last, breaking the silence, "that thing you did back there, calling Valifor, that was..." He trailed off, searching for the right word. "Amazing," he finished, a little helplessly. Una's smile deepened, shy but warm. "Thank you," she said softly. "No, really," Tidus said, leaning forward, his voice low. "I mean, I've seen Blitzball championships with tens of thousands of people screaming my name. I've played in the biggest stadium in the world. But that..." He gestured toward the temple, then shook his head. "That was on a whole different level. You just called a godlike firebird out of nowhere, like it was no big deal." Una laughed softly, the sound like wind chimes. "It is a big deal," she said, "but not because of me." Valifor chose to answer. "That's what makes it sacred." Tidus tilted his head. "So it's not just about power?" "No," Una said quietly. "It's about trust. The faith trust me to use their power to protect Spira, and I trust them to lend me their strength when I need it most." She glanced at him, her expression softening. "It's a lonely path sometimes, but with Valifor, I never feel completely alone." Tidus felt something twist in his chest at that. "You're not alone now, you know," he said. Una blinked, startled. "What?" "You've got me," Tidus said simply. "And Waka, and Lulu, and Kimari. We've got your back. Whatever comes next, we're in it together." Una looked at him for a long moment, her eyes shining in the moonlight. Then she smiled. Not the calm, serene smile of a summoner, but something warmer, more personal. "Thank you," she said softly. They sat in silence a little longer, the night stretching around them, and for just a moment it felt as though the weight of the world had lifted from Una's shoulders. And for Tidus it felt like something new had begun. Chapter 14. The Departure from Kilika. The morning broke clear and golden. Kilika's harbour was still scarred, blackened timbers and shattered docks, but the villagers had gathered anyway, lining the repaired pier as Una and her guardians approached. Tidus walked just behind her, feeling the weight of the moment. The villagers' faces were a mix of grief and gratitude, their eyes fixed on Una as though she carried the fate of every soul among them. As they reached the dock, the crowd parted, letting them pass. A small child stepped forward, the same little girl Una had comforted the night before. She clutched a flower, trembling. "For you," she whispered. Una knelt, accepting the flower with both hands. "Thank you," she said gently. Then she stood and raised her staff. The crowd bowed as one. "Lady Una," someone called, "bring us the calm." Another voice joined in. "We'll pray for you." Soon the entire dock was alive with voices, calling out blessings, prayers, hopes. Una bowed deeply, her hair catching the morning light. and Tidus felt a strange ache in his chest. She's really doing this for them, he thought. For all of them. They boarded the ship, a patched-up trading vessel that would take them to Luca. As the gangplank was raised, the villagers waved and shouted, their voices carrying over the water. "May Yevon watch over you. Send Sin to the far plain. Come back safe." Tidus leaned on the rail, watching them until the ship pulled away from the dock and Kilika became a smudge on the horizon. He glanced at Una. She stood at the bow, her back straight, her staff held like a standard. For a moment she looked every bit the summoner, noble, graceful, untouchable. But then the wind caught her hair and she turned her head slightly, and Tidus saw the quiet determination in her eyes. She wasn't just a symbol to these people, she was a girl who had chosen to bear this weight, and somehow that made her even more extraordinary. Chapter 15. Jecht. The ship cut smoothly across the morning sea, its wake trailing white ribbons over the deep blue. The wind was gentle, carrying the salty air and the creak of rigging overhead. Tidus leaned on the railing, staring at the horizon. He should have been excited. Luca was just ahead, the biggest city in Spira, the Blitzball capital. But his thoughts were somewhere else. He barely noticed when Una joined him, her presence quiet, her hands resting lightly on the rail. "You're thinking about home," she said softly. Tidus blinked, glancing at her. "How do you know?" Una smiled faintly. "You get this look on your face, like you're a million miles away." He let out a small laugh, then sighed. "Yeah, I was thinking about my old man." Una tilted her head. "Your father?" "Yeah." Tidus scratched the back of his head, suddenly unsure if he should even say it. "His name was Jecht." Una froze. "Jecht?" she repeated as though tasting the word. "Yeah." Tidus frowned. "Why? You've heard of him?" Una's eyes widened. "He was Lord Braska's guardian," she said softly, almost reverently. "He was famous in Spira." "Everyone knows the name Jecht." Tidus blinked at her, dumbfounded. "You're kidding." "No," Una said, smiling now. "My father used to talk about him. He said Jecht was strong and brave, though maybe a little brash." Tidus gave a short, incredulous laugh. "Yeah, that sounds like him." Una tilted her head, her expression curious. "What was he like?" "To you?" Tidus hesitated. The sea rolled beneath them, the sunlight catching on the waves. "He was tough," Tidus said slowly. "Too tough. He was always pushing me, always telling me I wasn't good enough. He drank too much, yelled too much. Nothing I did ever made him proud." His hands tightened on the railing. "I hated him." The words came out sharper than he expected. Una's smile faded, replaced with something softer, sadder. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Tidus looked at her, startled. "Why are you sorry?" "Because he's gone now," Una said gently. "And I can see that you miss him, even if you don't want to." Tidus opened his mouth to protest, then closed it again. She wasn't wrong. "Yeah," he said finally, his voice quieter now. "I guess I do." For a while they just stood there, the sea stretching out forever around them. Then Una smiled again, a small, thoughtful smile. "Maybe, on this journey, you'll learn more about him. About the man he became here in Spira." Tidus considered that, the wind tugging at his hair. "Yeah," he said at last. "Maybe I will." Somehow the thought didn't make him angry. Chapter 15.5. Lord Braska. The ship swayed gently as the morning sun climbed higher, casting a golden path across the ocean. Tidus stayed quiet, watching the waves, letting Una's words sink in. She didn't rush to fill the silence either. And that alone felt nice. Finally she spoke, her voice soft. "You know," Una said, her fingers tracing the railing, "my father didn't talk about himself very much either. But once, when I was very little, he told me something I never forgot. Tidus glanced at her, curious. What was it? Una smiled faintly, her eyes distant. He said the day he set out on his pilgrimage, he was terrified. Everyone looked at him like he was already a hero, but inside he just felt like a man who didn't know if he was ready. She looked down, her hand tightening on the staff leaning against her shoulder. But then he met his guardians, Jecht and Oren, and he said something changed. He said, I stopped walking for myself and started walking for them. And somehow, that made me brave. The wind played with her hair as she turned her gaze back to the horizon. I think that's why I wanted to become a summoner. Not just to follow in his footsteps, but to find that kind of courage. Tidus stared at her for a long moment, something twisting in his chest. You really are something else, you know that, he said finally. Una laughed softly, almost embarrassed. No, I'm just trying to do what I can. Yeah, Tidus said, his tone softer now. And that's what makes you amazing. A blush coloured Una's cheeks, but before she could answer, a shout went up from the crow's nest. Luca ahead! The deck came alive with activity, sailors hauling ropes, passengers hurrying to the railing. Tidus and Una leaned forward as the city slowly came into view on the horizon. First, the great stadium appeared, its massive spires gleaming in the sun, then the piers and bridges that arched across Luca's bright blue waterways. The sight was dazzling, a city of colour and movement after so much quiet and ruin. Tidus's heart leapt. Whoa, he breathed. Now that's more like it. Una smiled at his excitement, her earlier solemnity softening into something lighter. The ship glided toward the port, the cheers of dock workers and the cries of gulls filling the air, and, just like that, the solemn weight of Kilika seemed to lift. A new chapter of the journey was waiting for them. To be continued.